Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of Greening Our Cities, Powering the Future Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Innovations. I'm your moderator, Lanika E. Johnson, CEO of Trash Logic and Eco in the City, and I'm thrilled to have you all joining us. This session aims to explore the exciting possibilities and advancements in energy efficiency and renewable energy that are shaping the future of sustainability. In this era of climate change and environmental challenges, the need to transition to clean and sustainable energy sources has become increasingly urgent. Today, we have the privilege of hosting a distinguished guest who has dedicated her career to driving positive change in the realm of energy transition and sustainability. So please join me in welcoming our esteemed guest, Cynthia Wang. Cynthia is a seasoned executive and a pioneer in climate-aligned finance with a wealth of experience in leadership positions at investment banks and investment managers across the globe. She has been at the forefront of engineering productive collaborations and driving strategic evolutions in the energy transition, technology, infrastructure, and capital markets. Cynthia has an impressive track record of connecting the dots across finance, technology, and public policies, fostering international collaborations that have reshaped entire industries. Her expertise spans energy efficiency, renewable energy, and all aspects of capital markets. In addition to her impressive professional accomplishments, Cynthia has also made significant contributions to sustainability innovation through her work as the founder of the Sustainability Innovation Fund at Carnegie Mellon University. Today, she joins us as a trusted advisor to multi-billion-dollar global organizations, ready to share her insights and experiences. Welcome, 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 Cynthia. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we are super, super excited to have you. And just to get everyone caught up, Cynthia and I met in the Harvard Sustainability Leadership Program. So let's start there. Tell us what made you sign up for the program and go through the program, and what was that experience like for you?
Thank you. I think that's a great way to kick off our discussion for sure. To take a step back, I think over my multi-decade-long career, I was more focused on solving problems that were timely, like, the most pressing issues and challenges faced by industries and economies at the moment. But there's one thing that I really love about the commencement speech that Steve Jobs gave at Stanford in 2005. You cannot connect the dots unless you look back, until you look. So one opportunity that I had for looking back was another problem presented itself in the space of sustainable investing, where people were having even philosophical doubts about whether it makes sense to invest in, the things that are good for society in the long run. So I think one thing that was missing is really how to really think about systematically and across different industries to bring together people who are like-minded, but also can mobilize different resources and be the agent of change. So the missing piece is not in technology per se, not even in finance, but really in leadership. That's why the program made a lot of sense to me. Of course, it's not something that you can really just switch on with a few weeks or months of lectures and so forth, but it's a great place to start. And I also knew going into the program that I would meet people like you who are looking at the same challenges, but from different angles. And that's the only way we can actually find a solution. So that's why I chose it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I had a similar experience. I felt that I learned so much in the program. I felt stretched. I felt that it definitely took me a little bit outside of my comfort zone and made me think about sustainability differently. But I think even more importantly, the relationships that were built through the program, just the resources and the mental capacity of the collective, right? I think that was so powerful. And I think as we move forward, none of us know everything that there is to know, right? And so we need each other. We need each other so that we can solve these problems as you spoke about. because solving problems is what we're here to do. So to kind of kick off some of these questions. So throughout your career in sustainability, what would you say have been the most interesting trends that you've observed in how businesses and organizations are approaching environmental challenges?
I'd say, well, first of all, when I first started working on projects that we nowadays call climate aligned or sustainability aligned, they were not named in that way. They were more
Yes.
like economically driven, like renewable energy power plants, or
Yeah.
investments in the cyclical economy that were trying to address a commodity shortage. Like they were mostly driven by the economic needs or the return seeking desire of investors and businesses. So those were more entrepreneurial driven. Nowadays, I think the evolution has become more intentional and more purposeful, and also more driven by public policy and
Mm.
public sentiment. So that part is sort of going beyond the traditional drivers for commercial operations. And I think
Mhm.
that is a very good catalyst for accelerating the things. And I still believe doing good will be good for business, right? So in the long
Yes.
run, people see the value in these opportunities, even just purely from a commercial front. But having that consumer sentiment and then the government support would accelerate us, and the sense of urgency from the climate challenges actually is a good thing for people
Mhm.
to get on these projects more, sooner than later, right? So that part is sort of the thematic change that I see.
That's really interesting because I think I really approach everything that I do from a community standpoint. So I wonder from your perspective, what are you seeing from the public sector in terms of pressure or in terms of conversations that what do you think is influencing energy conversations in the boardroom from the community or from the public sector?
Perfect. There's many different angles you can look at this. I would say, of course, we can probably take the US as an example. Of course, it's a
Mhm.
global phenomenon. There's policies and there's politics. So we'll start from policies. We can go to the politics and have a very open-ended discussion that would take over the whole conference, I guess. But on the policy front, there's always been some government support on the federal level, and then to some extent in more progressive states, to support or at least incentivize investments in renewable energy or environmentally conscious projects and industries. But I think there's a learning curve to how to integrate policy into the actual economic decisions, because we're talking about boardroom decisions. In the early days, again, I go back to when renewable energy was sort of the core of these projects. I would say the policy incentives were pretty naive, in terms of tax credits, sometimes, more guaranteed on grid, meaning like the electricity you produce can actually be utilized and sold, then you can generate revenue from that. There's some preferential treatments for that, but that was it, right? And maybe you get some export credits for the equipment you buy, but it's not always bankable, in the sense that, say, if you're an early stage company that doesn't have a lot of revenue or tax liabilities, how can you take advantage of the tax credits? So in a way,
Right.
it's an egg thing, especially for the more capital intensive projects. Solar panels are probably easier because they're more like a manufacturing model, but then large plants, offshore wind and so forth, it's more costly and it takes a long time. And the political cycles of the policies will also make people question whether it's going to stay in the long run. Therefore, investors may not account for those incentives. But now I think the 2.0 version of policies is making the bankability question easier to answer. For example, of course, the interestingly named Inflation Reduction Act, right? We all know it's great for climate initiatives. There's a lot of built-in confidence in the bankability of these policies, not just the long-term tax credits, but also ways you can actually get upfront central government support, central federal government support, so that you don't have to have a large balance sheet to get started. And it's more inclusive in terms of the whole portfolio of solutions that can address the climate problems, renewable, decarbonization, alternative fuels, and so forth. So I think it's becoming more practical, becoming easier to be integrated, and then the boards actually have a whole suite of options to look at, and they all help enhance the bottom line of the business. At the end of the day, you still need to have the business as a sustainable operation, and you need the returns from different sources. So that's making at least kind of a good catalyst for even more investment in that direction.
So it's interesting because as you were talking, it made me think about how much conversation we were having in the program around stakeholders and some of that psychological safety and some of those other things that we were talking about. So in your interactions with diverse stakeholders, what strategies have you found have been most effective in creating buy-in and fostering collaboration towards some of these goals?
That's a very good question. And I think it's, in my experience, and everybody has their own style, right? I like to start with gaining good understanding of the stakeholders' own incentives. I don't know, in my articles, I actually mentioned there's a sort of a triangle, the geometry of doing the right thing. You start with governance, right? How decisions are made and who participate in the direction or in the decision-making process. And then you have incentives. What motivates people? What's their goal? And then accountability. Who can hold them accountable? And then also, right, who's going to manage the risk and watch out for the dangers around the corner? So if you think about these three elements, I would say to get people on board with things that they're not necessarily familiar with, you understand, well, you give them a voice, invite them into the governance. That's really important. So diverse group of stakeholders, that's really important. And that also enhances your ability to see across the whole system. System thinking is really important. And incentives, like what matters the most to them. Some people care more about temperature rising, right? Some people care more about the immediate economic impacts on different socioeconomic groups. And then some people think about, okay, how do we even get it done? Is it even, right? The technology, is it even ready? What's the operating risk of all these things? But then accountability, meaning that, okay, you tell me your incentives, how can I help you answer to your stakeholders so that when they hold you accountable, you have a good answer, you have a deliverable. And getting a good understanding of the three pillars of everybody's geometry is really important. That's where I would start and focus on.
All right, sustainability requires a multidisciplinary approach. So how do you navigate the complex interplay between environmental, social, and economic factors? And you kind of hit on that, but between environmental, social, and economic factors to ensure holistic and long-lasting solutions?
That's a billion-dollar question. I think we're still, there's a learning curve, right? Like I mentioned earlier, I think every member of this community, member institutional or individual, we're still trying to figure that out. But I do think it's important for people to connect with each other and understand different perspectives, but also see sort of, there's an engineering aspect of it, right? To enable smooth integration and feedback across these different areas. For example, if you start with some technology that's sort of coming out of the lab, I'm just making a hypothetical statement here, that could turn, bio waste into liquid fuel. Where do you do next? Where do you go next? You can't just say, this is great, let's just pour money into it. You still have to demonstrate that there's an economic model for making it scalable. And then you have to develop something that's actually going to work for, say, the industries that need this, like aviation. But then you need to have a good partnership with the aviators, right, to test this out and even moderate the kind of equipment that they have, the infrastructure they have. So there's a lot going on in the background that don't necessarily get the spotlight, but they are kind of the critical links. And without those, nothing can really be delivered. It would just be rhetoric. So I would say, in a way, have a shared goal and also some specialization, and then a developer's mindset to drive for some complex solutions. Because the simple ones, the low-hanging fruits, are pretty much gone, right? We need to do the harder things, which are more fun, and hopefully it's more impactful too. So.
Speaking of more fun, what about your work excites you the most? What do you get really, really revved up about?
I would like to think of myself as a lifelong learner. So the part about, of course, going to the program at Harvard, it's great to learn about the management lingo and so forth. But sustainability is such a broad topic. There's just so many things that I think collectively as a society, we are unfamiliar with. We're still testing out different concepts. So there's the technologies that are just emerging every day. And there's different ways or different infrastructures that enable these technologies to be scaled. That's also learning on the institutional level. And then just talking to people who are in the space. I don't know, I'm probably biased because I'm here, right? I think the people that I run into are great because they have a mission. It's not just getting things done and sort of, I don't know, joining a rat race, right, to be successful. It's really like doing something above and beyond that gives me a lot of energy. So yeah, that's what I enjoy most.
That's awesome. So one of the things that came up in the transportation conversation is just how much more advanced Singapore is with their transportation technology. Have you seen similar things in the energy space in Asia? Because I know you've worked in Asia and you've also worked in the US. So can you tell us what some of the differences are that you've experienced or that you've noticed between the two countries?
Sure. I'd say there's the stage of development that's kind of different. I mean, Singapore, of course, is also pretty developed and advanced economy, but different stage, meaning how long have they been there versus the US and so forth. And also the population density, not the demographics per se, although of course that makes a difference too, but really the size of the different geographies and then how distributed, like widespread people are, that is good or bad for a certain type of transportation mode, right? Obviously, Singapore is a very tiny island nation, densely populated, not a lot of diversity in terms of geography, and heavily dependent on marine transportation. So that gives you sort of the ideal design for what works for them. In the US, I'd say because it's such a big country, a vast continent, basically, from sea to shining sea, right? So there's a very wide variety of geographies and different communities. New York City is one thing. San Francisco is actually, even though it's also a big city, very different. It may not even have the geography or seismic conditions to build the subway system that New York City enjoys, right? But I do think, again, coming back to the common goal, but also different skill sets or endowments, natural endowments, there's different solutions. So it's always good to think of something as a transportation challenge with a portfolio of solutions. There's the mass transit powered by renewables. And then there's the smart transportation, and then infrastructure related, like smart traffic lights, simple things like that can reduce pollution and reduce energy consumption by so much. Not to mention, of course, if we electrify a lot of the local transportations, that will make a huge difference as well.
Bring it down to a very basic level. So just, homes and apartments, people living day to day. We're always hearing about energy conservation. What have you seen in terms of just getting creative in communities around conservation and asking people to conserve energy? Have you seen anything, any campaigns or anything that's, really working or helping to educate the public on how to conserve energy?
That's very relevant to everybody who's, I'm sure different states already started some different programs. I think there's also federal level, more like a consumer education, because a lot of the local policies are state and municipality driven. There's, of course, it's been around for a few years already, incentives or subsidies to install distributed renewable energy, solar panels, or access to the renewable sources of energy from the local utility companies, which are backed by state programs, of course. And then I think the next generation of things could become more inclusive. Not all states have the great access to, solar energy just because of different weather conditions, right? In New England is different than California, especially Southern California. But I think geothermal and even relatively new types of technologies to allow you to track where your utility companies are generating the kilowatt hours that are delivered to your house, that'll be interesting. I mean, even if my solar panels are not generating enough electricity for my house, if I'm using energy and I can pick and choose the type of generation methods they use, that'll be great. And then the companies themselves will have more incentive to invest in these projects as well. Then you're not limited to your local infrastructure, like, how big a roof do you have, right?
Right.
Or how, the other immediate investments on the individual level. I think there needs to be some of that. And then if there are ways so that for consumers to be part of a greater pool of capital, or give boardrooms basically motivations to invest in these things on a larger scale, that's even more. I do believe in the power of a group in addition to the power of individuals.
Fantastic. Well, Cynthia, thank you so much. I want to learn from you. What do you have going on? What's next for you? What are you excited about? And how can people reach out to you if they have questions?
Oh, thank you for that opportunity. I'm very excited about energy transition and related investment opportunities. So I would love to share more of that with people who are interested. Of course, Lenika, you will have my contact info. People can go to you to connect to me. But I would say I've posted an article recently, The Hunt for Green Unicorns. I'm an investor at heart. So I would still say you can't just build businesses based on people's goodwill. There needs to be long-term upside. And I do believe the market is ready for unicorn type of opportunities in the renewable or sustainability or energy transition space. Some examples include investments in existing technology, but not yet fully commercialized, but they have great potential, and they are more economic today than before because of the new policies from economies around the world, US, Europe, and so forth, and disclosure requirements that make these investments more visible, therefore tangibly beneficial to companies. And on the parallel track of finance and investing, there are also technologies. In this sense, I mean tracking and verification technologies to avoid greenwashing and to differentiate companies that are doing the right things versus that are not, so that you can actually capture the economic value, the extra return that these good companies deserve from an investment portfolio perspective. So both tracks have very interesting opportunities here in the US, out in Europe and Asia. So I'd say there's a lot of blue field opportunities out there, and it's just waiting for the right investors to participate in, and then industrial partners to adapt.
So Cynthia, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Is there anything else you want to share? I want to make sure you have an opportunity to get everything that you want out there before I let you go.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed talking about this. You can probably tell from the energy that I had for the topics. I'd say one last tidbit relating to this is I have benefit. I think I've benefited a lot from talking to people like you, and from our program. And I do think sometimes there's wiggles, right? Talking about the burden of being the first mover is true. I think in a way we all believe in, if not me, then who, if not now, then when, right? But just have confidence that there are people like us out there, and there are solutions, and the solutions are more real today than before. And ignore the pendulum of mood swings in politics, right? I think we're more mature as a society to move this forward. So
Absolutely, I agree. I agree. And sometimes we can get overwhelmed by all of it, because there's so many, just even discussing the stakeholders, right? We just go back to even having those conversations about all of the stakeholders, and so many people having so many competing interests.
exactly.
Right? It's sometimes it can become overwhelming, and it's sometimes hard to just stay focused on what the actual goal is, what it is that we're trying to achieve. And at the end of the day, just, coming back to that, coming back to what our core is, why we're doing this. So, and I really appreciate you saying that, because it gets daunting and overwhelming. And specifically, I'm in a very interesting middle position, right? Because I work between the cities and the community, and also the hauler. And so the hauler is constantly trying to get me shut down, because I'm impacting their bottom line. And the cities, have a lot of politics, and there's a lot of things they don't want to change. I'm just trying to make sure that people are recycling. That's really all I really want to happen. I just want people to reuse things, and I want to make sure things aren't going to landfill. But there's so many politics around it. So sometimes it gets daunting, sometimes it gets exhausting, and just staying focused on that. So I do appreciate you saying that. It really does bring it back home. So full circle.
I know, but it will get easier over time. And I think the politics even today is not going to hurt this long-term goal that much. I think more and more people are
Yeah.
alive. So
They are. And it's, there's great people out there, and there's so many people fighting the fight. And I appreciate that. Like, I'm getting excited to see more people understanding, the need for this, the need for real change and real solutions. And I'd love to see it. So thank you so much.
this is fun.
Yeah, it is. So thank you. So have a great day, Cynthia. Thank you for doing this.
Have a great event tomorrow. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Okay. Bye-bye.